Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. My name is Muhammad Numan. How are you, my dear students? I hope you will be fine. Welcome to Advanced English Grammar. In our today video, we're going to talk about here the fifth relative pronoun, and that is whose. In the previous classes, we had discussed the four relative pronouns, which were who, whom, which, and that. We had discussed them in detail in the previous classes. Now we have to talk about the fifth relative pronoun, whose. But before that, I'm going to tell you the definition of the relative pronoun to understand you in a better way. And you have to learn this definition. A relative pronoun points to a noun to show which person, place, or thing is being discussed. A relative pronoun creates a link with a noun in a sentence. It points out to a noun in a sentence. It creates a relationship with a noun in a sentence. It tells us much clearly about the noun. That's why we are learning here, we are putting here the relative pronouns. Now let's talk about here the relative pronoun whose. Whose per people or per things. We can use the relative pronoun for human beings as well as for non-living things. And what is the function of the relative pronoun whose? Possessive pronoun. It shows the possession of someone or something in a sentence. It creates a relationship with other person. It shows the ownership. It shows the property of someone or something. Examples are here. This is the boy whose father lives in London. Now you can see here whose. It creates a relationship, the ownership with father. This is the boy whose father. Now look at here. Whose father. Relationship. It shows the relationship here with father. Whose father lives in London. And another point here is that you cannot say here that this is the boy's father live in London. Not at all. You cannot say here that. Okay? Christina is the girl whose parents are poor. Now look at here, whose parents are poor. So it shows here the relationship. Another example I have given here, I have a dog whose name is Tommy. Another point here, which is very important. I'm gonna tell you here, I have a dog. In English, the animals, they are also considered as a non-living things. Just in English. If we talk about here the biology, the chemistry, or someone else, or in other subjects, so the scientists, they consider the dog, the animals as living things. But in English, they are considered as a non-living thing. Okay? You have to keep in your mind. I have a dog whose name is Tommy. A triangle whose three sides are equal is called an equilateral triangle. No, it shows here the relationship, the ownership. But in modern language, in modern English, the dog whose name was Tommy, this correct, it is also correct. This sentence, this is absolutely correct, but this is informal. This is informal. Keep in your mind. The dog whose name was Tommy. Although it shows here the relationship, but instead of this, you can use another sentence also. The dog, the name of which was Tommy. Why I use here whose and which? Whose, if you remove se from whose, it will remain who. And whose is the derivative form of who. Keep in your mind. And whose we were using in the early stages, in the early period, in the first era, we were using whose just for human beings. But in modern English, we can use both. Whose and which. Because which, now look at here, which we can use for non-living things. And whose we were using it just for the human beings. In the first time, we were using whose just for human beings. But in modern language, you can use them whose and whose. They are both correct in modern English. The dog, the name of which was. For example, in the possessive, in the noun, we had learned this, that, for example, this is Salman's brother Wahid. We had learned about the apostrophes, S. Apostrophe, this is Salman's brother Wahid. Okay? But they were human beings. But instead of this, if you say here that tables, legs, they are considered wrong. With non-living things, you cannot use the apostrophe. Instead of this, you would say the leg of the table. And another example, Pakistan's population. No, this is incorrect. This is completely wrong. Pakistan's population. You would say the population of Pakistan. Now look at here. The dog, the name of, with non-living things, we cannot use the apostrophe. Yes. And whose, it is also used in modern language, in modern English, it is used for both, for livings here as well as for non-living things. But in the first time, it was used just for human beings. The dog, the name of which was. Now you can see here, which, this will be the formal way of telling here this sentence. A house whose walls are painted looks beautiful. This is the formal way of using this sentence. And a house, the walls of which. This is the good way of telling the non-living things, about the non-living things here. Okay? So in the modern, as I told, in the modern language, you can use whose for both, as I have written over here. Okay? So it was today class about the whose we can use for the relationship, for the ownership, for the possession. We can use whose, which is the relative pronoun. Inshallah, in the next video we will be talking about here the relative pronoun what, and that will be our last video about the relative pronoun. Subscribe my channel. My channel name is Spread the Useful Knowledge. Share all these videos with your friends, with your relatives, and through WhatsApp, Messenger, and Facebook. That would be very kind of you. Thanks a lot of you. Thanks a bundle.